The other day I made a bunch of different plant-based milks, and so today we're going to do something with a bunch of different plant-based milk pulps. Because when you make your own milk, you're both making the milk itself and the pulp, which is all of the solids that remain. Hi, I'm Val. I made the recipe website Very Vegan Val. Thanks for being here. Now, obviously, you might not be making the exact same plant-based milks as I am, but hopefully these ideas are helpful to you and you can change it out to suit your purposes. Let's go ahead and get started with our first pulp creation. Let's start with sort of a classic and make some crackers. I'm going to use lentil pulp, chickpea pulp, and some of this flax pulp. The lentil pulp is very wet. I noticed that the ingredients that were more processed, meaning things like these lentils that had already had their hulls removed and were split, ended up with much less and much wetter pulp than ingredients that were more fibrous, I guess, like this chickpea, for example. So right now we're mixing together half a cup of lentil pulp, half a cup of flax pulp, an entire cup of chickpea pulp, and about a quarter cup of olive oil. Let's add some flavor. I'm going with a couple tablespoons of Italian seasoning, about a teaspoon of salt, and some amount of smoked paprika. I'm also going to try and soak up some of that moisture with just about half a cup of whole grain spelt flour, but you can use any flour, I'm sure. Changed my mind. I'm just going to finish this off and do a cup. Let's preheat the oven to around 300 degrees Fahrenheit. That is, 150 Celsius? I'll put the actual number on the screen. We're going to line our baking tray with parchment paper. And I'm going to start with about half of our mixture to see how that goes. We do want it spread very thin. Okay, we have a thin, even layer. And I don't know why, but my mind would like there to be like texture. So I'm going to add some texture with a fork. This might be a mistake. On the other tray, I'm not going to do this, and we will see which ends up better. And then I'm just going to lightly score this into cracker-sized pieces. Let's do that again with the second half of our batter. I'm also going to top with some flaky salt. And into the oven they go until they're dried out and crispy. Next, let's tackle this almond pulp. Now, something that people sometimes do with almond pulp is to make like an almond pulp cheese, which I think sounds delightful. However, something that I've never seen with almond pulp, although I'm sure I'm not the first to do it, is a fermented almond pulp cheese. So that's what I'm going to try today, although I guess I'll actually be trying it tomorrow. But we're going to get it started today. I'm going to use 1/16 of a teaspoon of mesophilic cheese starter. This is a vegan version, and mesophilic means medium heat loving, so it ferments at a medium heat, like room temperature. I know a lot of people don't have cheese cultures. If vegan cheese making is something you're interested in, I highly recommend getting them. But if you're just going to do it for a one-off, you could also use probiotic powder. You're going to want a little bit more of that, maybe about, a quarter teaspoon. And we're just going to mix that in. Now that we've got this nicely mixed in, I'm going to cover it lightly with plastic wrap just to make sure that the surface doesn't oxidize. And then I will let it sit out at room temperature for 12 to 24 hours. Next up, cashew pulp. This is another one of the wetter pulps. I'm sure you could fix that by straining your pulp through a cheesecloth, but kind of the whole reason I used the almond cow was so I didn't have to do that. So I'm just going to be charging forward with slightly wetter pulps. What I thought we could do with this one is kind of like another cheese, except for this time we're going to do like a queso dip situation. I thought it might be nice to pair this cashew with a bit more of our chickpea pulp. Now this chickpea pulp is made up of raw chickpeas, so I'm actually just going to microwave it to cook it before we use it. All right, we have about a cup of our chickpea pulp here. I'm going to cover it with a lid and try microwaving it for 5 minutes and see where that gets us. While we are waiting for our chickpeas to cook, let's add some stuff to our cashews. 2 tablespoons of miso paste, a sprinkle of turmeric. That's really just for color. a quarter cup of oil. Our chickpeas are done. I'm definitely glad they had a lid on them because they tried to explode a few times. But it's got a nice thick porridgey texture. All right, let's keep on going. Half a cup of nutritional yeast. 1.5 teaspoons of smoked paprika. If we're gonna get this as smooth as I want, we're gonna have to use the blender. And after giving it a little taste, I really wanted more richness, so I added maybe another 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil. I'm also adding just a little bit of a vinegar-based hot sauce for some heat and some vinegar. Now let's give it a blend. Oh yeah, it was worth getting out the blender. Look how smooth and creamy that got it. Pumpkin seed pulp, we're gonna turn it into salsa. We're gonna add some chilies to a hot pan and half an onion, as well as a few cloves of garlic. We're gonna throw half a lime in there too. And we're just gonna cook until everything is charred. I almost forgot, I want some cumin seeds as well. Turned off the heat. I'm gonna add about a cup of water. And we're just gonna let everything cool down and let the peppers hydrate a little bit. So we have about 3/4 of a cup of our pumpkin pulp. And we're just gonna add everything else into the blender. I'm gonna add a small handful of cilantro. And then we're gonna blend it, and I'll add this cooking liquid as needed until it blends smoothly. There we go. It's very spicy and limey. It needs salt, so we're gonna start there. Okay, we're using a lot of different pulps in this one. We've got our coconut pulp, pistachio pulp, our peanut pulp, and our oat pulp jelly. Honestly, I feel like this one you could just eat like oatmeal. Mix this all together. Now let's add some spices. I'm gonna add some cloves. I think I'm gonna add a little garam masala actually. Ginger, and just heaps of cinnamon. Brown sugar, I'm gonna add all of it that I have left, which I'm guessing was about 3/4 of a cup, maybe half a cup. And then we're gonna add some substance. Start with a cup of oats, cup and a half of oats, and about half a cup of coconut. That's shredded unsweetened coconut, the same stuff we use to make our coconut milk. Just a little pinch of salt. And I suspect if we don't add more oats and just leave it as is, we'll get like a nice crumbly texture. I am tempted, however, to add some peanuts. Nice handful of peanuts and a handful of pistachios. All right, we're using the same baking sheet and parchment paper as before. I just flipped it over to avoid any flavor contamination, and I'm just gonna plop our granola mixture on here. Spread it out as much as possible, and then we'll chuck it in the oven, and every so often we'll take it out, and as it starts to dry out, we'll break it into pieces until it's completely dry. Since we're at it, should we check out the crackers? So they came out feeling really leathery, and I was not sure that they were done. But the more they cool, sort of the crisper and less leathery they're getting. So I think they just need to cool fully, and then they'll be done. The last pulp I wanted to get to is this one, our soy pulp. Now, soy pulp actually has a name. It's called okara in Japanese, and I've used it before as like a meat substitute. You can almost treat it like a ground meat. I made stuffed cabbage with it. But what I was curious about is, could you use it to make like a egg or tofu scramble alternative? So that's what we're going to be trying. We're going to start off by sauteing some onions. Time to add the okara, about 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast, half a teaspoon of black salt. This is what gives a tofu scramble an eggy flavor because it has sulfur in it. I may end up adding more later, but we're going to start with half a teaspoon. And a little sprinkle of turmeric just for color. Coming back in with another 1/4 or so cup of nutritional yeast. And I'm going to add a spice blend that I really like. This is Sunny Paris. It is kind of on the more expensive side, but Penzeys always has deals, so I usually get it then. The best part of any filming day, tasting. I'm gonna start off here with our soy pulp tofu scramble. So I don't think this really works as a tofu scramble. It's a little bit too grainy and dense. The flavor is good, but the texture is just not quite right for a tofu scramble alternative. I did dress it up a little bit and make myself some tacos with guacamole, some radishes that I dressed in lime juice and salt, and some crispy onions. And I thought we'd give it a try this way too. I am glad I made this. It's definitely not the greatest tofu scramble or egg scramble substitute, but in the context of other ingredients, it is totally acceptable. So while I wouldn't go out of my way to make this as a tofu scramble, I would happily eat it as a tofu scramble mixed in with other things, like in a breakfast burrito or taco situation. Next up, we're gonna go for our pumpkin seed salsa. This is definitely not like an idea that's original to me. Pepitas in salsa is fairly common in Mexico. It's almost more like a mole, but pepita, pumpkin seed. So not gonna lie, I've tried this already and there is an issue. It is too bitter. I always think I'm clever when I blend a whole lime or a whole lemon into something. I don't know, something about it makes me feel happy. I didn't spend the time juicing it. I'm not throwing away the rind. However, I think the addition of the whole lime plus charring the lime added just too much bitterness to this salsa. So I don't recommend doing that. It's hard to sort of taste around that, but it does have a nice level of chili, a nice level of garlic, and it has a nice consistency, which I think is thanks to our pumpkin seed pulp. If you make this, add the lime juice at the end like a normal person. Next up, we've got our queso. And this one was made with the cashew and chickpea pulp. Now with all of these dishes, I'm obviously not expecting you to have the exact same pulps I did. It's more just like, here are some things you could do. So you could make this same thing without any chickpea pulp. It's incredibly creamy looking, very silky, good flavor, a little bit heavy on the smoked paprika, but very, very creamy. An excellent waste product use. I would do that again. We have our crackers. Now, some of these took longer in the oven than others because they were more centrally located and a little thicker. However, I will say I noticed that they were done before I thought they were done. They had more of a leathery texture. And then when I took them out, they cooled down to be snappable. Very enjoyable. It's crisp, it's light, it's flaky. It's very snackable, and these were very easy to make. I see why a lot of people make pulp crackers. They are definitely a win. They have a little bit of a bean flavor to them that I think is really nice. There was no issues with them sticking together, I think especially because of the flax pulp. They stuck together really, really well, actually. Another one that I would happily make again. Finally, we have our pulpy granola. You can see we have these sort of small clusters of oats and pulps and nuts all together. You could break it up more if you wanted, but I think this is about the perfect consistency. Quite nice. It is very flavorful from all the spices and the nuts that are in it. I've actually never made a granola with clusters in it before. I really like it. If only I had some milk for it. I'm gonna add the pistachio milk. It's my favorite. That's a nice granola. And I like that, again, it's largely made out of something that otherwise would have been thrown away. Those are my favorite kinds of recipes. Now, the only thing left to taste is the almond cheese, which hasn't fermented yet, and I haven't finished making it yet, but by the time you see this, it'll happen like right now. It's 24 hours later. And time to finish off our cheese. You can smell a nice sour smell coming from the fermentation, which is perfect. We're gonna keep it really simple. I'm gonna add about half a teaspoon of salt. I'm also gonna add a tablespoon of nutritional yeast and a couple tablespoons of melted coconut oil. Mix everything together. Now, if you have an immersion blender, this is a perfect use for it, because it will not only combine the oil really well, but it will get your pulp a little more finely blended. Now we're gonna just set it in a mold. I have a small ramekin with the same plastic wrap I used when fermenting the cheese. And I'm just gonna add some spices to the inside. This time I'm using Justice, which is another great blend from Penzeys. A nice layer on the bottom. And we'll just pop it in the fridge for a bit so the coconut oil can set. You know, actually, that's a pretty darn good cheese. I thought it might be too gritty, but it has a nice amount of creaminess to it, probably in part thanks to the added coconut oil. It's got an excellent tang, and then the shallot and garlic and all the spices that are in the Justice seasoning really add a little something to the flavor. I would say that that was an incredibly simple thing to do with your pulp and incredibly effective. And in case you're wondering if you can ferment your nut pulp, seems like you can. I'm gonna give it back to yesterday, Val, to finish this up. That's it for today. Hopefully some of these recipes will help inspire your vegan milk pulp usage. Let us know in the comment what some of your favorite things to do with plant-based pulp is, or what things you thought looked interesting here. We'd love to hear about it. Other than that, if you could like this video, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much, bye-bye. Also, if you voted for someone who made empty promises and maybe you're starting to realize they didn't have your best interests at heart, the brave thing to do is to change your mind and to see what actions you can take to create positive change. The cowardly thing to do is to bury your head in the sand and keep on insisting that everything's fine or that there's a different reason for all your problems.